I always thought I'd leave my parents' house on my own terms. Maybe with a diploma in hand, a U-Haul waiting outside, and a smile that said, I made it. I thought I'd hug them goodbye, promise to visit on weekends, maybe even miss them a little. Instead, I walked out dragging 2 suitcases in the rain while my father watched from the doorway like I was a problem finally solved. It was my birthday. I was 22. I didn't even get a card. It started that morning like every other silence. My parents sat at the kitchen table, perfectly composed. My mother, Margaret, scrolled through her tablet with one manicured hand wrapped around a black coffee. My father, Richard, buttered his toast with the same precision he used to cut people off in meetings. They didn't look up when I walked in. Good morning, I said, trying to sound normal. Hopeful, even. Margaret glanced at me, then returned to her emails. Richard didn't even flinch. I poured myself a cup of coffee. My heart pounded so hard I could barely hold the mug. This was the day, I thought. Maybe something would be different. Maybe they'd surprise me, acknowledge me. Show me love in their own rigid, uncomfortable way. After a few minutes, I couldn't take the silence anymore. So, it's my birthday today. Margaret didn't look up. We're aware of the date, Abigail. Just like that, flat, dismissive, not even a happy birthday. I ate quickly, the food like sand in my mouth, and left for campus. The day passed in a strange haze. Jessica, my best friend, took me out for lunch and gave me a handmade bracelet. 3 strands braided in my favorite colors. For my best friend, she said, tying it around my wrist. May this year bring you all the freedom you deserve. I nearly cried at the table. Later, Professor Willis pulled me aside after class. Your portfolio project is exceptional, she said. You have real talent, Abigail. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I thanked her, but the words settled into something fragile inside me. Like she could see I was barely holding together. I got home around 6. Both my parents' cars were already in the driveway. That alone was strange. My father never came home before 7. My stomach dropped. When I stepped inside, the air felt too still. Margaret sat on the edge of the couch, her legs crossed, hands folded neatly in her lap. Richard had a folder open on the coffee table, printed pages stacked with surgical precision. Sit down, Abigail, he said, motioning to the armchair across from them. I didn't move at first. Then I sat, carefully, like it was a job interview and I didn't know the position. Richard started immediately. Your mother and I have been reviewing the household finances. Your expenses have become untenable. My expenses? I repeated, confused. I stay within the budget. I barely buy anything. Margaret cut in. It's not just about the money. It's your continued poor decisions. The graphic design nonsense, the attitude, the defiance. I'm about to graduate, I said. 3 months! I've worked so hard! Richard slammed his hand on the table. The papers jumped. You are nothing but a burden, he snapped. You always have been. I flinched. We've carried you for 22 years, he said. And what do we have to show for it? A daughter wasting her potential on a hobby. Someone who ignores our guidance, our expectations. It ends now. My chest caved in. What are you saying? We're done, Margaret said. Her voice was icy. No more support, financial or otherwise. You'll need to find your own way. You're kicking me out? My voice broke. Tonight? The date is irrelevant, Richard said. You have 30 minutes to gather your belongings. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. We've paid your final month of tuition, Margaret added, like she was announcing a charitable donation. Your car insurance ends today. Your phone line will be terminated at the end of the month. Your health insurance is already canceled. Each word was a blade. You can't do this, I whispered. Not with no warning, not on my birthday. We can and we are, Richard said. You'll never survive on your own. Not with your lack of discipline. We expect you back within the week, ready to re-enroll in a real major, business, finance, something respectable. It wasn't a punishment. It was a test. Obey, and I could come back. Resist, and I was gone. I stood slowly, my legs trembling. I won't be back. Their faces didn't move, not a flicker. I ran upstairs and packed blindly, clothes, laptop, toiletries. My hands shook so badly I could barely zip the suitcase. I left most of my art supplies behind, my childhood books. A birthday cupcake Jessica had given me still sat on the kitchen counter. I didn't touch it. When I came downstairs, Richard stood at the door.
"House key," he said, hand out.
I unclipped it from my ring and dropped it into his palm. "You'll regret this," Margaret said behind him. "Stubbornness isn't strength." I didn't answer. I couldn't. The door clicked shut behind me. The lock slid into place. I was alone. It started raining. Of course it did. I loaded the suitcases into my trunk, rain soaking through my jacket. The tears on my cheeks mixed with the drops. I drove away with no destination, no plan, no idea how I'd survive the next week, let alone the rest of my life. Jessica's apartment was barely big enough for 2 people, but she met me at the door without question. "You're staying here," she said.
No arguments.
That night, I lay on her couch in the dark, staring at the ceiling while her roommate slept behind a paper-thin wall. I had no home, no health insurance, no access to my own money. Just a degree I hadn't finished, 2 suitcases, and a birthday I'd never forget. But I also had one thing my parents never saw coming. I had a memory, and they'd given me the password. I didn't sleep that first night. Jessica gave me her only extra blanket, and her old sweatshirt with the sleeves cut off. I curled up on her lumpy couch, knees tucked to my chest, staring at the cracks in the ceiling plaster. I was so tired, but my body wouldn't let me rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face. "You're nothing but a burden." That line had teeth. It kept biting. At 3 a.m., I sat up and checked my bank account. Balance: $237.48. The rest had been in the joint account my parents made me open for oversight. My name was on it, but the control had always been theirs. I tried logging in, denied. I tried resetting the password, email no longer recognized. They'd already shut me out. In less than 24 hours, they didn't just kick me out, they erased me. I stared at that $237 like it might grow if I blinked hard enough. Rent, food, gas, art supplies, school printing fees. All of it now impossible. I had 3 months left until graduation, and suddenly it felt like the summit of a mountain I'd never trained to climb. I stayed up until the sky began to turn gray. When Jessica woke for class, she found me sitting at her small kitchen table, still in yesterday's jeans with circles under my eyes deep enough to swim in. "You didn't sleep, did you?" I shook my head. She sat across from me, took my hands in hers. "First thing, call financial aid. There's got to be emergency support for students in crisis." I nodded, even though my body felt like glass. I was scared to move too quickly, afraid I'd shatter. At 8:30 a.m., I was standing outside the university financial aid office, student ID clenched in my hand like a lifeline. The woman behind the desk, Mrs. Sullivan, had the kind of practiced calm you get from hearing the worst every day. "I'm so sorry to hear that, Abigail," she said after I explained. "Unfortunately, since your FAFSA lists your parents' income, you're still considered a dependent. But they cut me off." "I have nothing. I understand," she said gently. "But to change your status, we'd need documentation proof of estrangement. Tax returns showing you support yourself. Legal emancipation." She handed me a stack of papers, loan applications, work-study forms, lists of emergency scholarships. It was something, but not now, not this week, and certainly not in time for rent or food or tuition next month. I left with my backpack heavier and my heart hollowed out. That afternoon, I'd begged my manager at the campus coffee shop for more hours. "I can give you 10, he said. "That's all the payroll allows. 10 hours a week at minimum wage. It would cover maybe 2 meals and a bus pass." I didn't cry, not there, not in public. I waited until I was back on the couch at Jessica's, watching her roommate laugh at something on her laptop. Kimberly had no idea what was happening in the next room. That I was unraveling one stitch at a time. I curled into a ball, pressing my face into the couch cushion and letting it out quiet, shaking sobs I tried to keep to myself. On the 3rd day, the text started coming. From my father: "Return the family property immediately. This includes your laptop, the luggage, and any household items. You have no legal claim to them." From my mother: "We've donated the rest of your belongings to charity. Perhaps your childish sketchbooks will be of use to someone with real potential. They called it property, not memories, not gifts, not love. Just items. Leverage. It was like I had never been a daughter, just a long, expensive project that had failed to meet deadlines. That night, I was in the university's computer lab, trying to apply for a food assistance program when someone sat next to me. Rough week? A voice asked. I looked up. Tyler, a classmate from advanced design, kind, observant, and usually quiet. My parents froze my account, I said. The words spilled out like I'd been holding them too long. They kicked me out on my birthday. I have no money, nowhere to go. They're threatening to take back everything, even my computer. Tyler whistled low. Jesus, I'm so sorry. After a pause, he added, my dad did something similar. When I came out, cut me off, froze everything. Tried to control me when he couldn't manipulate me anymore. I looked at him. Really looked. There was something in his eyes, knowing, sharp, alive. How'd you handle it? I asked. He leaned back in his chair. Not always legally, but I learned how fragile financial systems really are, especially when people get too comfortable. I blinked. What do you mean?
He explained quietly, carefully, how many older adults never change their passwords.
How they reuse the same logins. How identity protection is more illusion than shield. How most banks and credit systems rely on questions like mother's maiden name and high school mascot. My dad's password? He said, smirking. His birthday plus his company name plus an exclamation point. Same for 10 years. And suddenly I remembered something. The night I helped my father set up his online banking years ago. How annoyed he was with the tech. How he handed me a notepad and made me write everything down. He never changed it. I was sure of it. Do they still use the same email? Tyler asked. I nodded slowly. Everything goes to his company address. It's still tied to their credit card profiles. And recovery accounts? He raised an eyebrow. Then you might have more access than you think. I didn't say anything. My heart was racing. A line was forming in my mind, a plan. That night, back at Jessica's, I sat with my laptop balanced on my knees, staring at a blank screen. I hadn't opened my design software in days. I didn't have it in me to create, but I couldn't sit still either. I opened my email instead. There was a new message from my father. We've begun donating your childhood items to Goodwill. Perhaps this will teach you responsibility. I read it 3 times, my sketchbooks, my art supplies. My projects from freshman year, gone, like they never mattered, like I never mattered. And that's when something broke, not like a meltdown, like ice. Something cold and sharp and necessary. They wanted me to disappear quietly, but I wasn't going to disappear. I was going to freeze them out instead. I didn't want their money, not really. What I wanted was for them to feel what I had felt, powerless, discarded, blindsided. I wanted them to know what it is like when someone flips your life upside down without warning, not because you deserve it, but because they can. I wasn't going to steal from them. I was going to lock the gates and throw away the key. Tyler and I met at an off-campus cafe the next day, huddled in a corner booth with his laptop between us and a decaf coffee I couldn't afford. Before we start, he said, I'm not helping you commit fraud. I don't want their money, I told him. I just want them stuck, inconvenienced, powerless for once. He nodded. There's a difference between hacking and using legitimate access you already have. You set up their accounts. You know their security info. You're not breaking in, you're knocking on a door you helped build. For the next hour, Tyler walked me through every detail. How many credit cards do they use? 4, I said. 2 personal, 1 for my mom's shopping, and 1 business card my dad uses like a trophy. All right, he said, fingers flying. Let's start with security freezes. They're legal. You're using official channels. It'll force lenders to require extra verification, not illegal, just ... We used public computers, no login history, no personal Wi-Fi. I created a new secure email address, no name, no link to anything else. Tyler showed me how to reroute notifications, block tracking, mask IP locations. It felt ridiculous at first, then powerful. At 11:36 p.m., I logged into my father's credit account. Username, Richard Mio 64 password. Financial. 1964 still worked. He had never changed it. Their entire empire cars, trips, club fees sat behind a password pattern so fragile it could have been cracked by a stranger with a notepad. I didn't touch the balances, didn't cancel anything. Instead, I selected the report card as compromised option. Then chose mail new card to alternate address and entered their own home address just to delay the process. Their cards would be frozen for up to 10 days while replacements were issued. Then I enabled fraud alerts. I answered every security question but with slightly incorrect information. Mother's maiden name, added a period, first pet's name, capitalized the second letter. Just enough to break the automated system, but not enough to trigger suspicion of tampering. It was all technical, clean, cold, and perfectly legal. I repeated the process for each card, cross-checking the timing with their billing cycles. Tyler helped me identify their payment schedules. Your dad's car lease auto-pays on the 3rd, he said. That's 3 days from now. And the country club membership hits the 4th. Perfect. We froze their main cards on the 30th. That gave just enough time for the chaos to ripple outward. Then we submitted security freeze requests with the 3 major credit bureaus. Again, nothing illegal. Just a consumer exercising security rights. My parents had no idea. They were living like royalty in a castle with no moat, convinced no one could touch them, and they handed me the keys. I walked out of that cafe feeling something I hadn't felt in days. Power. Not the petty kind. Not the revenge-hungry fantasy kind. The grounded kind. The I'm not done kind. The next morning, I received the first notification from the alternate email. Subject: account flagged for verification. It had worked. I didn't smile, I didn't cheer. I just closed the tab and opened my textbook. Let them sit on hold with customer service for hours. Let them wonder why nothing would reset. Let them taste the confusion, the helplessness. Let them feel what it's like to be on the outside of their own life. 3 days later, it began. The first message came from my cousin Stephanie, a group text forwarded from my mother. Having strange issues with our cards. Richard thinks it may be identity theft. If anyone needs us, call rather than text. We're dealing with banks all day. I stared at the screen and felt a rush of bitter satisfaction. The kind that tastes like freedom and poison at the same time. By that afternoon, reports trickled in from mutual friends. Margaret had taken her garden club out to a high-end bistro. When the check came, her card declined. She tried another. Declined again. She had to call one of the women to cover the bill. A woman who loved gossip. My father's story was worse. He was at lunch with potential clients, young tech entrepreneurs he was trying to impress. His card got rejected at the table. One of the clients paid. I imagined Richard's jaw tightening. The flinch in his eye. The humiliation blooming beneath his tie. Tyler texted me that evening. He filed a police report. Claimed identity theft. It'll go nowhere. No actual crime was committed. I didn't reply. I just sat in Jessica's living room, staring at my hands, wondering if I was becoming the same kind of person they were. Not the words, not the insults, but the strategy. The calculation. Was I just like him? The thought crawled down my spine. Jessica noticed. She always noticed. You check that email like you're watching the stock market crash. I blinked. I'm just keeping track. Of what? Their downfall? I didn't answer. She sat beside me. Abby. They don't deserve your attention anymore. Not even in revenge. I'm not trying to punish them, I said. I just want them to know they didn't win. She nodded, quiet for a moment. Then, okay, just promise me you won't lose yourself while proving your point. I didn't make that promise. Because I wasn't sure if I could keep it. Later that night, I lay awake in the dark, staring at the bracelet Jessica gave me still tied around my wrist, its colors soft and fraying. I thought of the cupcake I never ate, of the rain on my face as I drove away, of the door closing behind me. They took everything, so I took something back. Not their money, not their house, just their illusion, and maybe that was enough. For now, it's strange how silence can feel louder than shouting. After the first wave of disruptions hit, my parents went quiet. No more emails demanding property, no more accusations. Just a stillness that felt heavy, strategic, like they were regrouping, but I didn't need their words to know things were crumbling. The damage was unfolding exactly as I had planned, quietly, legally, and with surgical precision. On the 3rd of the month, my father's luxury car lease payment bounced. Late fee triggered. Automated warning issued. His assistant had to call the dealership and smooth things over, blaming a merchant error. I knew this because the assistant was Jessica's mom's friend. And Jessica's mom couldn't help but spill every detail over coffee.
He was livid, she told Jessica, kept snapping at his assistant.
Said the bank must have been hacked. I listened without reacting. Then came the country club fallout. Their monthly membership payment failed on the 4th. Margaret had arrived for her standing Friday lunch only to find her access suspended. She tried using a backup card. Also declined. She called the front desk from her car, demanding explanations. When she couldn't reach Richard, she had to leave in front of the valet who, according to a mutual neighbor, offered her a happy Friday as she pulled away in silence. She never returned his tip. These were people who built their entire identity around control, around image. Now they were unraveling in public, and the best part? They still didn't know I was the one pulling the strings. They believed they were victims of digital fraud, a breach, a systemic failure. They filed reports, called every hotline. Changed nothing that mattered. Because how do you protect yourself from a ghost? I watched it all unfold from a borrowed couch, drinking cheap coffee and wearing the same hoodie 3 days in a row. And I thought I'd feel powerful. Instead, I felt hollow. Like I'd built a bomb, but now I was just staring at the crater. Jessica noticed it first. She always did. "You haven't opened your sketchpad in 2 weeks," she said one night. I shrugged. Not in the mood. "That's not like you." I didn't respond. The truth was, every time I sat down to draw, nothing came out. My lines were stiff, my ideas flat. It was like something in me had locked up. One morning, while reviewing the latest notifications from the email I'd set up for monitoring the fallout, Jessica walked past and glanced at my screen. "You check that email more than your class portal." I minimized the tab. I just want to make sure they're still feeling it. "Are you feeling it?" She nodded. "The satisfaction, the justice." I looked at her. "I don't know." That night, I met with Professor Willis for a routine portfolio review. She flipped through my latest work, then looked up with furrowed brows. "Your technique's still strong," she said, "but your voice, it's muffled." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "These pieces don't feel like you. They're calculated, clean, but there's no soul in them." I stared at the sketches. She wasn't wrong. "I've been distracted," I said. Her voice softened. "Abigail, whatever's pulling you away, let it go. Art requires presence. You can't create if you're anchored to anger." Her words stayed with me the entire walk back to Jessica's presence. What had I been present for lately? My friends? My work? My own healing? Or my parents' chaos? The next morning I got another update. Margaret had canceled her weekly salon appointment. She claimed a scheduling conflict, but everyone knew the truth. Her card was still frozen. The gossip was beginning to spread. My mother, who once judged everyone else's chaos, was now the subject of it. I closed the laptop and just sat there, staring, because something had shifted. I didn't want to check the email anymore. I didn't want another forwarded message about Richard's canceled meetings or Margaret's whispered excuses. I wanted out. Not just from their house or their control, but from them. From the emotional prison I kept walking back into, even while pretending I'd escaped. That afternoon, I met Tyler at the library. "I think I'm done," I told him.
He nodded slowly. "It worked. You got your moment."
"I got more than a moment," I said. "I got control. But I lost something too." He looked at me carefully. "You haven't become them, Abby, but if you keep going—" "I know," I cut in. "That's why I'm stopping." We sat in silence for a while. Finally, I said, "Can I fix it?" "Depends what you mean." "I mean, can I clean it up without them knowing it was me?" Tyler smirked. "I can help you send an anonymous cleanup package, instructions, reset guides, security fix walkthroughs. It'll look like customer service material. I want to do it in 2 days." "Why 2?" I thought for a moment. "Because I have a design internship interview in 3. And I don't want this cloud hanging over me." Tyler grinned. "Fair enough." That night, I didn't open the monitoring email. Instead, I opened my sketchbook. I drew for the first time in weeks. Nothing dramatic. Just the view from Jessica's window, fire escapes, street lamps, the way the city curved around the sky like it was holding its breath. It wasn't much, but it was mine. When I showed it to Jessica the next morning, her face softened. "There you are," she said. And for the first time since the day I lost everything, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Me, the real me, not the fighter, not the ghost, just Abigail. And that was enough, for now. The studio apartment wasn't much. It had beige walls that hadn't seen fresh paint in years, a window that rattled when the wind picked up, and a tiny kitchenette with a single electric burner that sparked if I looked at it wrong. But it was mine. I got the keys on a cloudy Thursday after my emergency housing application came through. The graduate student who had lived there before me had withdrawn mid-semester. That's how I got lucky. A room no one wanted. Became my first real home. I unpacked slowly. Not because I had a lot I didn't, but because I wanted the act of unpacking to mean something. For weeks, I'd lived out of 2 suitcases like a guest in my own life. But now I folded shirts into drawers. Tacked art prints on the wall. Hung Jessica's bracelet over the corner of my mirror like a quiet promise. That night, I stood in the center of that tiny room, turned off all the lights, and just breathed. For once, there was no shouting in the next room. No locked accounts, no threat looming like a storm cloud. Just silence, mine. I slept better than I had in months. The campus job started the following Monday. The design department had an opening for a student assistant, and Professor Willis had pulled strings to make sure it went to me. I spent my mornings editing flyers, updating event posters, helping first-year students navigate the printer without losing their minds. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough for groceries. And every day I walked into that office, I felt less like a broken thing, and more like someone slowly piecing herself together. Jessica visited on the second night and brought takeout noodles in paper boxes. She sat cross-legged on the floor, eating out of the carton with a plastic fork like we were 13 again. "I can't believe you finally have your own place," she said, mouth full. "It smells like independence." Or expired carpet glue. Same thing. We laughed. It felt good to laugh without guilt clinging to the edges. When she left, I checked my calendar. The internship interview was in the morning. It was for a boutique design firm in the city, small but respected, with a portfolio that made my fingers twitch with inspiration. Professor Willis had submitted my name after the student showcase. "I know you've had a rough semester," she'd said, "but this is your moment. Show them who you are." I stayed up late polishing my portfolio. Removed anything that felt forced or emotionally hollow. I added new pieces, ones born from stillness, not spite, the drawing from Jessica's window. A flyer I had made for the design department's spring showcase. A mock campaign about rebuilding from the ground up. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest. The next morning, I wore my only blazer, the one I'd saved from my sophomore internship, and pulled my hair into the kind of low, clean bun that made me feel quietly powerful. I stepped into the firm's conference room with my shoulders back and my knees only slightly shaking. 3 women interviewed me, all sharp-eyed, quick-smiling, curious. "What's one design you're proud of that wasn't client-driven?" one of them asked. I pulled out the flyer for the campus art therapy group. "I made this after learning what creative silence feels like," I said. "It helped me get back to my own voice." They looked at each other. I looked at them. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was pretending. I left the interview lighter than I entered. When I got back to my apartment, I opened my laptop to a new email. Subject: your summer internship offer. I didn't cry. I just sat there for a moment, hand over my mouth, and felt the ground beneath me go still. This was mine. No one else's name was on it. No conditions, no strings. Just me, standing on the merit of who I'd become. Over the next few weeks, I began shaping a life I actually wanted to live. I shared meals with my housing neighbors, learned how to stretch groceries across 7 days, and picked up side design gigs on campus flyers, social media graphics, posters for student events. I even helped Kimberly, Jessica's roommate, create a logo for her handmade jewelry business. "You're like brilliant," she said. "Have you ever thought about doing this full-time?" I smiled. "That's the dream." Some nights I still thought about my parents, about what they were doing, what they were saying, whether they ever figured out who froze their accounts, but I didn't check anymore, not the monitoring email, not social media, not even the gossip texts from Stephanie or other family friends. They were no longer the weather system in my life, just background static. One evening, while sitting on my balcony with a mug of instant cocoa, I opened my sketchbook and wrote at the top of a clean page, "The greatest revenge is not survival, it's thriving in a life they can't touch." Then I drew a door, half open, a shadow behind it, and a single figure stepping into the light. It wasn't angry. It wasn't even proud. It was free. For the first time, I understood what Dr. Nelson had meant in therapy. That letting go wasn't surrender. It was choosing not to carry the weight of people who had never chosen me. I still had scars, but they weren't open anymore. They were reminders, markers of how far I'd come. A few days later, I received a call from the internship coordinator. One of their full-time designers was going on leave. If things went well over the summer, there could be a long-term spot for me. I thanked her, hung up, and sat in the quiet, smiling. That night, Jessica came over with a tiny cake. "I know your birthday's still weeks away," she said, "but I think we should start early this year. You deserve a real one." She stuck a single candle in the middle and lit it. "Make a wish." I looked at her, at the cake, at the walls of my little studio and the light flickering in the window. Then I closed my eyes and wished for nothing at all. Because, for once, I didn't need anything more than what I already had. Exactly 1 year later, I woke up without dread in my chest. No knot in my stomach. No waiting for a shoe to drop or a cruel message or a silence too loud to ignore. Just sunlight filtering through the cheap blinds of my apartment. And a calendar notification on my phone. June 3rd, Abigail's birthday. I stretched out under the covers and smiled. For the first time since I was a kid, I didn't feel like my birthday was something I had to survive. I felt like it was mine. Truly mine, Jessica texted first. "Happy birthday, Queen. I'm bringing cake tonight. And no, you don't get a choice." Tyler sent a second one. 1 year stronger, 1 year smarter. "Proud of you." I smiled, fingers curling around the phone, then placed it face down on the knit stand. I took the morning slow. Made coffee. Watered the tiny basil plant on my windowsill. Put on the playlist I'd made for days like this, soft, warm, a little nostalgic. And then I opened my laptop and got to work. The internship had turned into a full-time role 2 months ago. I was now officially a junior designer at Crate and Brush, handling small client projects and social campaigns for local businesses. Nothing huge, nothing glamorous. But mine. At lunch, I went downtown to my favorite bookstore, the one with the mismatched shelves and the cat that always slept in the history aisle. I bought myself a blank sketchbook with a linen cover. It felt like a beginning. Later that evening, Jessica came over with 2 cupcakes, a bottle of grocery store champagne, and a hand-lettered card that said, "To the girl who didn't just survive, but remade herself." We ate on the balcony, laughed, talked about the past like it was a town we once lived in but no longer missed. And then, almost casually, Jessica asked, "Do you ever hear from them?" She didn't have to say who. I shook my head. "Not since last summer. They really just never reached out?" "Not once," Jessica frowned. "Does that bother you?" I thought for a moment. The silence used to hurt like a rejection that kept renewing itself. But now, no, I said, not anymore. Because I'd stopped waiting for them to become people they never were. Because I built a life that didn't need their approval or their permission. Because I no longer mistook absence for a wound. Sometimes it's just space, and space can be good. After Jessica left, I cleaned up, pulled out my new sketchbook, and sat at my desk. I drew the window view again. Same fire escapes, same street lamp. But this time I added myself in the scene, shoulders back, hands in pockets, face turned toward the sky. I didn't even realize I was smiling until I saw it mirrored in the sketch. I was halfway through adding in the light patterns when my phone buzzed, a name I hadn't seen in over a year. Margaret Morgan. My hand froze. The screen lit up again. One new voicemail. I didn't listen to it right away. Just stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the icon. Then, slowly, I played it. Her voice was sharp but strained. Abigail, I assume today's your birthday. I hope you're well. Your father and I are traveling this week, but I wanted to extend a gesture. Perhaps it's time we moved on from last year's drama. If you're ready to speak rationally, you have our number.
Click. No apology, no warmth. Just
Control. Still, even now, like nothing had changed. Like I hadn't changed, I deleted the message without replying. And instead, I picked up my pen and drew her too small in the corner of the page, holding a phone, her mouth a flat line, while the rest of the world bloomed around her. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even surprised. Because I had already buried the version of me that would run to that call like it was oxygen, that girl was gone. This version? She breathed fine on her own. Later that night, I lit a single candle on the remaining cupcake, turned off the lights, and whispered to the quiet, "Happy birthday, Abby." Not because I needed to hear it, but because I deserved to. Because this day wasn't about them anymore. It wasn't about what they took from me or what they failed to give. It was about everything I'd learned to give myself, solitude without fear, work that lit me up, friends who became family, a voice that no longer stuttered in the shadow of their disapproval. I blew out the candle and didn't make a wish. Because the life I wanted, I'd already started living it.